There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The Secretary will read of the day.
Introduction, Appropriation Bill, of the Division of Revenue Bill.
The Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Honorable Speaker, honor to present the first budget of our 5th Democratic Parliament, and my first indeed. Members of the House, fellow South Africans, over the past 20 years, we have built houses, delivered water and electricity, improved access to schools and healthcare. Yet, there are still people living in shacks, there are still schools without sanitation, there are still patients without care. We have made progress in dismantling apartheid divisions, yet there are still fault lines across our social landscape. We have agreed on a national development plan, but there is still hard work ahead in its implementation. Though we continue to register positive growth rates, many businesses have struggled to maintain profitability. Unemployment remains high, and government has had to adjust to slower revenue growth. Today's budget is constrained by the need to consolidate our public finances in the context of slower growth and rising debt. And so we must intensify our effort to address economic constraints, improve our growth performance, create work opportunities, and broaden economic participation. We need to achieve these goals if our national development plan is to be realized. On the one hand, our development path is limited by the resource constraints, outlook, and on the other hand, it seeks to lift these constraints by strengthening public institutions, supporting innovation, and making markets work better, and investing in infrastructure and our people. The 2015 budget is aimed at rebalancing fiscal policy to give greater impetus to investment, to support enterprise development, to promote agriculture and industry, and to make our cities engines of growth. As outlined by President Zuma in his State of the Nation address on the 12th of February, Cabinet has agreed on 9 strategic priorities to be pursued this year with the private sector and all stakeholders. These priorities include 1, resolving the energy challenge, 2, revitalizing agriculture, 3, adding value to our mineral wealth, 4, enhancing the industrial policy action plan, encouraging the private sector investment is the 5th, 6, reducing workplace conflict, 7, unlocking the potential of small enterprises, 8, infrastructure investment, and lastly, to support for implementation of the National Development Plan through in-depth, results-driven processes known as Operation Pakisa. I repeat these, honorable members, because I think it's important to reflect on them. The first of these laboratories focused on the ocean's economy, including offshore oil and gas exploration and aquaculture opportunities. Already, this has led to investment of 9.6 billion rands in Saldanha Bay. Strategies for improving primary health clinics, have also been developed through a Pakisa process. The mining sector will be next. Strategies, as I've said, and I said the mining sector will be next. And these processes draw widely on the talents and expertise of South Africans from the public and private sectors and the scientific and research community. In each of these areas, there are many programs and interventions underway and numerous stakeholders and institutions involved. Members of the House will appreciate, however, that having a plan and a series of activities is not on its own enough. Intensive effort has to go into details of implementation, understanding the risks and opportunities of changing market conditions, as well as identifying institutional and financial options. There are many possible plans and priorities, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable members. The challenge of governance is to choose wisely between competing alternatives. The budget process plays a critical role in clarifying these options, probing their costs, and assessing implementation. It seeks to allocate resources systematically and fairly. This year, we received around 400 tips from fellow South Africans on the budget, them tipsters. Quite rightly, there are two main areas of concern. The first is that many people have concern about public service delivery. For example, Asif Jatham advises that municipalities should follow SARS electronic payment systems. Mark Tichalain appeals for an improved work ethic and pride in a job well done in the public service. Pumelelo Ncwadi suggests that youth-owned cooperatives should be supported to produce lettuce and herbs for local hospitals and schools. And then there is advice on tax matters that are directed at me. Christopher Pappas suggests that fast foods should be subjected to sin tax. Mandy Morris says it is time VAT was increased to 15%. On the other hand, Tabile Wongi proposes that young professionals should be exempt from tax at least 1 year of work. That just shows how many young people are in the room. Fellow South Africans, I will return shortly to the tax ones that are directed at me. The budget documents I tabled today, and I just checked the weight, I'm still going to ask Parliament to provide such facilities so that we are able to say the weight without counting pages. These documents are designed to make our budget choices and their implications transparent. The processes which follow in this House, bringing medium-term plans and programs under the scrutiny of portfolio committees and subjecting ministers and officials to parliamentary accountability, are essential disciplines in the translation of plans into service delivery programs. And so in presenting this budget to members of the House, I'm obliged to caution that it again comprises a weighty set of documents and explanatory papers, as I've said. Members who feel that the burden of after-hours reading is excessive are referred to my predecessors, Minister Gordon and former Minister Manuel, who were responsible or who oversaw the design of these instruments of accountability. Thankfully, their advice to me is that it does not all have to be incorporated into the budget speech. Allow me, therefore, to recommend this year's budget review for the further attention of members. It is somewhat differently structured from the past. There is a new chapter on the financial position of public sector entities and an annexure on progress in infrastructure spending. I turn now to the economic context within which the budget has been prepared. Global economic growth is expected to remain sluggish over the period ahead, rising from 3.3% in 2014 to 3.5% this year. There is considerable variation in economic performances between countries, and economic trends are likely to be volatile. In the United States, 3.6% growth is expected this year, but in Europe, the outlook remains weak and could still be destabilized by disagreements between debtor and creditor nations. In emerging markets and developing economies, growth of about 4.5% is expected. China's growth is expected to slow to 6.8% this year. Amongst our neighbors in Africa, the recent shifts in commodity prices will benefit some countries and disadvantage others. South Africa will benefit from the lower oil price, but our major mining exports have been negatively affected by global slowdown. Our deepening trade and investment links with sub-Saharan Africa continue to offer favorable growth prospects. Exports to Africa grew by 19% in 2013 and 11% in 2014. Fellow South Africans, our primary challenge is to deal with the structural and competitiveness challenges that hold back an investment in our economy. The most important of these is undoubtedly the security and reliability of energy supply. Electricity shortages hold back growth in manufacturing and mining, and also inhibit investment in housing and raise costs for businesses and households. Mainly for this reason, our projected economic growth for 2015 is just 2%, down from 2.5% indicated in October last year. We expect growth to rise to 3% by 2017, as we had projected also during the MTBPS. Consumer price inflation peaked at 6.6% in June last year, and it has subsequently declined to 4.4% last month, and is expected to average 4.3% in 2015, laying a foundation for economic growth. Higher growth is possible if we make good progress in responding to the electricity challenge and if export performance is stronger. The best short-term prospects for faster growth lie in less energy-intensive sectors such as tourism, agriculture, light manufacturing, and housing construction. These, honorable members, are also sectors that employ more people, and so they contribute to more inclusive growth. Efforts to support these sectors have to be intensified. Progress in agriculture and manufacturing employment requires a constructive labor relations environment and well-targeted support for emerging enterprises. The Deputy President is leading a process at NEDLAC in which social partners are tabling proposals on a framework for sustainable labor relations. While the manufacturing sector has largely underperformed in recent years, there has been an encouraging growth in investment since 2010, particularly in upgrading machinery and equipment. The turnaround in footwear and textiles is also welcome and should boost job creation over the period ahead. In agriculture, we have seen investment and export growth in horticultural products such as grapes, citrus, and tree nuts. Tourism and related services, oil and gas development, communications and information technology also offer many opportunities. Although our fiscal position is constrained, there are considerable financial strengths on which South Africa's growth strategy can build. First, interest rates have remained moderate, which reflects the credibility of fiscal and monetary policy and the favorable inflation outlook. The capital market rates at which government and the corporate sector borrow have declined over the past year, signaling continued investor confidence in the South African economy. Secondly, the exchange rate depreciated by 11% against the US dollar in 2014, after declining by 15% in 2013. This, coupled with low inflation, contributes to our trade competitiveness and partially offsets the deterioration in commodity prices. South Africa has a buoyant, which is the third point, capital market. It is open to foreign investors and is a major contributor to direct investment elsewhere in Africa. Our banks and other financial institutions are well capitalized. Our company law and tax frameworks are robust, and we have excellent property market institutions. The first phase of implementation of the National Development Plan is elaborated in government's medium-term strategic framework. If we remain united and energized around its implementation, government, labor, business, and all South Africans, we will continue to make progress towards a just and prosperous future. A sound budget framework is one of the enabling conditions for implementation of the National Development Plan. Fellow South Africans, it has now been 8 years since the global financial crisis began. In responding to low economic growth, government allowed for continued expenditure growth and a wider budget deficit to cushion the economy from a potential hard landing, which would have resulted in an increased debt burden on the state. Fiscal room created during the economic boom leading up to the financial crisis cushioned us against tax increases as a first response. Our fiscal rebalancing has included cost containment measures and intensified efforts to improve efficiency and expenditure. These measures are yielding positive results already. However, growth performance remains weak and substantial repayments of debt are becoming due. It is now clear that we can no longer postpone consideration of additional revenue measures. In choosing among our tax options, the financial health of households and businesses is a primary consideration. As indicated in the medium-term budget policy statement, the key features of the budget framework for the period ahead are as follows. I repeat them, honorable members, as we said in the MTBPS. The first is that a reduction in the main budget expenditure ceiling of about 25 billion rands over the next 2 years, compared with the 2014 budget baseline, was a necessity. The second was an increase in taxes amounting to 17 billion rands in 2015/16. The third was revised spending plans across the whole of government aimed at greater efficiency, reduced waste, and an improved composition of spending. Fourth was a consolidation of government personnel numbers, and lastly, financing of state-owned companies where required without raising national government's budget deficit. In the budget framework we tabled today, a consolidated deficit of 3.9% of GDP is projected for 2015-16, falling to 2.5% in 2017-18. Consolidated non-interest expenditure will rise from 1.1 trillion rands this year to 1.4 trillion in 2017-18, which is an average real increase of 2.1% a year. The share of personnel compensation is projected to remain at around 40% of non-interest spending. Interest on state debt will rise from 115 billion rands this year to 153 billion rands in 2017-18. Reductions in budget allocations have been targeted at non-critical activities. Cost containment and reprioritization measures will limit growth in allocations for goods and services to 5% a year. Spending on catering, entertainment, and venues is budgeted to decline by 8% a year. Travel and subsistence will be cut back by 4% a year in real terms. Compliance will be reported from now on, compliance will be reported by the Auditor General in his audit outcomes. Allocations for critical items such as school books and medicine, for police vehicles and medicines, and for fuels and for maintenance of infrastructure will grow faster than inflation. The budget framework includes an unallocated contingency reserve of 5 billion rands next year, 15 billion rands in 2016-17, and 45 billion rands in 2017-18. This could allow for new spending priorities to be accommodated in future budgets. It takes into account that the economic outlook is uncertain and that both weaker growth and rising interest rates are possible over the period ahead. We are also mindful that public service salary negotiations have still to be concluded. We hope that agreement will be reached in time for salary improvements to be implemented in April. Over the next 3 years, the total amount of money owed by government is projected to increase by about 550 billion rands to 2.3 trillion rands by 2017/18. Redemptions on debt issued over the past decade will add 190 billion rands to the medium-term borrowing requirement. Net loan debt of the national government is expected to stabilize at less than 45% of GDP in 3 years' time. South Africa's liquid capital markets and our standing in international markets enable us to meet this borrowing requirement. So there is no problem about debt sustainability, all things being equal. But we are mindful that debt sustainability requires a prudent budget framework and improvements in both saving and investment. Therefore, our fiscal policy stance recognizes that state-owned companies and municipalities will continue to face substantial investment requirements over the period ahead. Moderation in the main budget creates space in the wide capital market for infrastructure financing of both wider public sector and the private sector. In addressing these and other fiscal challenges, government is firmly resolved to steer a responsible and sustainable course. Honorable Speaker, our Constitution requires an equitable division of nationally collected revenue between national, provincial, and local government. This is set out in the Division of Revenue Bill and its accompanying explanatory memorandum. The allocations are explained in the budget review and elaborated in the estimates of national expenditure, which I implore members to pay much attention to. In preparing these proposals, we have benefited from recommendations of the Financial and Fiscal Commission and Parliament's committees. As is required by the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act of 2009, the budget review includes a report which responds to concerns raised by the Finance and Appropriation Committees and in Portfolio Committee's budgetary review and recommendations reports. We greatly appreciate these contributions of Parliament to the rigor and integrity of our budget process. The national share of non-interest expenditure is about 48%, with provinces receiving 43% and municipalities receiving 9%. Allocations to basic services provided by municipalities have been prioritized, despite the constraints of the framework, of the budget framework. A new approach is proposed to cities to support their growth and restructuring and strengthen infrastructure investment, and a review of local government infrastructure grants is in progress, which will lead to simplification and consolidation of the financing arrangements. Over the longer term, progress in municipalities requires local economic growth, property development, and revenue capacity alongside national support. These are key elements in the Back to Basics municipal development strategy championed by Minister Gordon, my predecessor. Honorable members, our support through the budget for economic development is wide-ranging, as it must be if we are to diversify our growth and broaden participation. Innovation and technology changes are at the heart of this development strategy. Support for the oceans economy has been allocated 296 million rands over the next 3 years. This will enhance our climate change research and management of ocean resources. South African science and technology also continues to benefit from our leading role in the Square Kilometre Array Astronomy Partnership, which will spend approximately 2.1 billion rands over the next 3 years. Minister Pando here is guiding our science councils towards more effective partnerships with industry and academic institutions. 2.7 billion rands has been allocated over the medium term under the Mineral Policy and Promotion Program to promote investment in mining and petroleum beneficiation projects. 108 million rands has been allocated to research and regulatory requirements for licensing shale gas exploration and hydraulic fracturing. Government to strengthen support for agricultural development and trade under Minister Sukwana. The projected conditional allocation to provinces over the medium term is 7 billion rands. Access to finance by emerging farmers will be expanded in collaboration with the Land Bank. Since the inception of the Recapitalization and Development Program in 2008, 1,459 farms have been supported and 4.3 million hectares has been acquired for redistribution. A further 1.2 million hectares will be acquired over the next 3 years, and 4.7 billion rands is allocated for recapitalization and development of farms. Establishment of the Office of the Valuer General under Minister Nkwinti's department will assist the orderly implementation of land acquisition and redistribution activities. Fellow South Africans, unemployment remains our single greatest economic and social challenge. Government continues to prioritize measures aimed at generating employment. These include tax incentives for employment and investment, support for enterprise development, skills development, and employment programs. 10.2 billion rands has been allocated over the MTF period to manufacturing development incentives and support for growing service industries, such as business process outsourcing. Under Minister Davis's oversight, the Manufacturing Competitive Enhancement Program will spend 5.4 billion rands and will assist close to 1,450 companies with financial support to upgrade facilities and skills development. Special economic zones are allocated 3.5 billion rands over the medium term, mainly for infrastructure development. The work of Minister Honeycomb, his department in promoting tourism, continues to be supported. Over the MTF period, Minister Zulu's new department will spend 3.5 billion rands on mentoring and training support for small business. The Jobs Fund will spend 4 billion rands in partnership with the private sector on projects that create new employment, support work seekers, and address structural constraints to more inclusive growth. The Community Works Program will be extended to all municipalities and its allocations and will increase by 21% a year. The Department of Environmental Affairs has an allocation of 11.8 billion rands to fund more than 107,000 full-time equivalent jobs and 224,000 work opportunities through the Environmental Public Works programs. A total of 590 million rands has been allocated to the Green Fund over the medium term for strategic environmental projects in partnership with the private sector. Honorable, expenditure on health and social protection will continue to grow steadily, contributing to better life expectancy and household income security. Spending will reach 178 billion rands in 2017-18. We have seen a marked reduction in child mortality over the past 5 years, supported by improved access to antenatal services. Our antiretroviral treatment program now reaches 3 million patients. The mother-to-child transmission of HIV has decreased from 20% a decade ago to 2% last year, and is expected to decline further over the period ahead. In this budget, 1.5 billion is shifted from provincial budgets to the National Department of Health to enable the National Institute of Communicable Diseases to be directly funded. This will be offset by the lower tariffs for services provided by the National Health Laboratory Services. Port health services have also been shifted from provinces to national department. The Office of the Health Standards Compliance has been listed as an independent legal entity with a budget rising to 125 million rand in 2017-18. Under Minister Mtsoaledi's direction, there has been progress over the past year in preparing for the transition to national health insurance. A discussion paper on financing options will be released shortly by the National Treasury to accompany the NHI white paper. I can confirm that I had a conversation with Minister Mtsoaledi on this matter, and we are ready to do this. Honorable Speaker, I've also agreed with Ministers Dlamini and Minister Oliphant that we will jointly publish the long outstanding discussion paper on social security reform. Both health insurance and social security are vital concerns of all South Africans, and we look forward to public debate and engagement with stakeholders. Social grants, honorable members, play an important role in protecting the poorest households against poverty. Social assistance beneficiaries numbered 16.4 million in December 2014. In order to accommodate the growth in numbers, the budget proposal include an additional 7.1 billion rands on the social development vote. Fellow South Africans, I'm also pleased to announce adjustments to monthly social grants with effect from the 1st of April. We are going to be very moderate. The old age war veterans, disability and care dependency grants will increase by 60 rands to 1,410. Child support grant will increase to 330 rands. Foster care grants will increase by 30 rands to 860 rands. In consultation with the Department of Social Development and taking into account consumer price inflation, we will review the possibility of further adjustments to grant values in October. Minister Dlamini, I'm still going to come to you. Honorable Speaker, over 640 billion rands will be allocated to basic education during the next 3 years. I'm surprised the applause is not that high. Under Minister Motsega's oversight, personnel planning for schools is being to ensure that learner-teacher ratios are maintained at appropriate levels. The number of qualified teachers entering the public service is projected to increase from about 8,200 in 2012-13 to 10,200 in 2017-18. To support teacher training, 3 billion rands will be awarded in Funza Lushaka bursaries over the next 3 years. We will distribute 170 million workbooks to over 23,000 public schools over the medium-term expenditure period. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an exaggeration. 170 million workbooks to over 23,000 public schools over the medium-term expenditure period. Each learner in grades R to 9 will receive 2 books per subject each year in numeracy, in mathematics, in literacy, language, and life skills. The School Infrastructure Backlogs Program is allocated 7.4 billion rands for the replacement of over 500 unsafe or poorly constructed schools, as well as to address water, sanitation, and electricity needs. The Education Infrastructure Grant of 29.6 billion rands over the medium term will enable all schools to meet the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure by 2016. The budget also includes 4.1 billion rands over the MTEF period to build and support public libraries. School and community sport programs and sports academies will receive 1.7 billion rands in conditional allocations to provinces. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, allocations to post-school education and training perpetua exceed 195 billion rands over the medium term, increasing at an annual average of 7.1%. Universities operating subsidies will amount to 72.4 billion rands, and transfers to universities for infrastructure of 10.5 billion rands are proposed, including the 3.2 billion rands for the new universities of Mpumalanga and Solblaki. We are mindful on student financing at our higher education institutions. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme is projected to spend 11.9 billion rands in 2017-18, which is up from the 9.2 billion rands in 2014-15. This will support a further increase in university enrollments and in technical and vocational colleges. Progress in the quality of post-school education programs is clearly critical. Under Minister Nzimande's direction, the 21 sector education and training authorities and the National Skills Fund will continue to provide work placements for students and graduates. Raising the number of trainees who qualify as artisans is a special priority. Options for improving the skills funding system will be reviewed in the period ahead. Fellow South Africans, we have all been reminded of the importance of infrastructure investment and maintenance over the past year. It is not just an inconvenience when the lights go out. There is a cost to the economy in production and income and jobs foregone. Many South Africans regularly experience other kinds of infrastructure failures: unreliable water supplies, roads that are impassable when it rains, trains that break down, or poor telecommunications linkages. These are large, long-term, costly challenges, and so the work of Minister Peters, Minister Jumaat Peterson, Minister Cwele, Minister Mokonyane, and Minister Patel in securing the maximum value out of available funds is essentially critical. We are able to make substantial contributions through the fiscus to infrastructure services over the period. These, honorable members, include 1.1 billion rands for the upgrade of Moloto Road to improve safety and mobility on this road. The passenger rail agency's 53 billion rands 10-year renewal program is now in progress. The first 44 new train sets of 528 coaches will be delivered over the next 3 years. Over 80 billion rands for local roads and over 220 water and sanitation. R105 billion rands for housing and associated bulk infrastructure requirements. Minister Sisulu. Over 18 billion rands for 875,000 households to be connected to the grid or to receive off-grid electricity, and 1.1 billion rands for broadband connectivity in government institutions and schools. I need to emphasize, Honorable Speaker, that not all infrastructure services qualify for budget funding. Cost recovery from users is a key foundation of infrastructure sustainability, together with fiscal support for access to essential services. I therefore wish to endorse the Deputy President's carefully balanced approach to resolving the Gauteng Freeway financing matter. Concerns regarding the socio-economic impact of toll tariffs have been heard, and the revised monthly ceilings will shortly be proposed. We will include a national contribution to meeting the associated costs and the adjustments appropriation later in the year. Measures will also be taken to ease compliance and to improve enforcement. But cost recovery from road users will continue to be the principal financing mechanism for major road users. That applause was not adequate. Honorable members, national government is working closely with metropolitan municipalities to invigorate urban development, as the NDP emphasizes. Realizing the economic dividends of urban growth requires a new approach to providing infrastructure, housing, and public transport services, while overcoming the spatial divisions of apartheid. This budget recognizes the need to assist cities in mobilizing the finance required for more rapid infrastructure investment and maintenance. Amendments will be proposed to the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Functions Act to clarify the rules surrounding bulk infrastructure charges and ensure an equitable and transparent system of contributions by land developers. The National Treasury has recently met the mayors and city managers of all 8 metropolitan municipalities to discuss how to accelerate investment, improve infrastructure maintenance, and strengthen financial management. Metropolitan councils will announce details of their investment programs in their forthcoming budget statements. National Treasury, the Department of Cooperative Governance, and the Development Bank of Southern Africa will host a conference on urban infrastructure investment later this year. This will enable private investors to obtain further details of financing opportunities that will arise from this new program. I've also been reminded of the role of tax measures in supporting urban development. With us in the gallery today is Mr. Vuisa Kabaka, a Cape Town entrepreneur and co-founder of the Good Neighborhoods Foundation. His advice is that, and I quote Mr. Kabaka, government should encourage township investment. For instance, it could promote urban development and regeneration through accelerating depreciation allowances for new building and construction or refurbishment of existing buildings, close quote. And thanks, Mr. Kabaka, for this hint and tip. National allocations to municipalities continue to be equitably allocate and to be aligned with Minister Gordon's Back to Basics strategy. The local government equitable share was protected from the baseline reductions to ensure that service delivery to the poor remains prioritized. Allocations for water, sanitation, and electricity in rural municipalities have been increased substantially. 4.3 billion rands will be spent over the next 3 years to build capacity and to strengthen systems for financial management and infrastructure delivery. The collaborative review of local government infrastructure grants will give special attention to the maintenance of infrastructure so that the gains made over the past 20 years continue to be extended and enjoyed by all over the life of these assets. Honorable members, we still confront unacceptably high levels of crime in our country. Government spending on public orders and safety and security and defense will therefore continue to increase from 163 billion rands this year to 193 billion rands in 2017-18. Police services receive about 48% of the total allocation. Effective and efficient courts under Minister Masuta's oversight and Chief Justice Mogoeng's leadership are central to constitutional democracy and the functioning of the criminal justice system. Over the medium term, a total amount of 492 million rands has been prioritized towards improving access to justice. This will increase capacity for support personnel, public defenders, and prosecutors. In order to strengthen the independence of the judiciary, the Office of the Chief Justice has been established as a new department. It becomes fully operational on the 1st of April 2015 with a budget over the MTF period of 5.2 billion rands. The fight against corruption remains a central priority. Additional allocations have been made to the Public Protector and the Financial Intelligence Center for increasing their human resource capacity. South Africa's Defence Force under Minister Mapisa Nqakula, earlier she complained that she didn't get the money. It will continue to be deployed for safeguards and in peacekeeping operations in several conflict areas. Budget provision for border safeguarding and regional security amounts to 2.8 billion rands, Minister Nqakula, and 4.5 billion rands, respectively, over the next 3 years. The budget also includes the 834 million rands for access of, this is an important one, the budget also includes 834 million rands for access of military veterans to health care and housing services. Honorable members, better value for money in public service delivery depends on rigorous financial management, effective systems, and an unrelenting fight against corruption. Supply chain management in the public sector is far from perfect. There are frequent allegations of corruption and inefficiencies. Against this background, the National Treasury has conducted a review of public sector supply chain management, drawing on the views and experience of government, business, and civil society. The review was published last month and is a candid reflection of our current state of public sector procurement and the reforms that are needed and the opportunities that an efficient, transparent supply chain management system present. After consultation with the Minister of Basic Education, the following reforms are in progress just in that department. And thanks to Minister Mshekha for agreeing to be the first. All books delivered to schools from January 2016 will be managed through a centrally negotiated contract. With effect from May this year, all school building plans will be standardized and the cost of construction will be controlled by the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. Honorable members, too often and for too long, we've paid too much for school building projects. Routine maintenance of school buildings and minor construction works will be decentralized, but this will be accompanied by measures to combat inefficiency and corruption at district and school levels. From April 2015, a central supplier database will be introduced. Suppliers will now only have to be required to register once when they do business with the state. This will significantly reduce the administrative burden for business, especially small enterprises. Here is an interesting part. This database will interface with SARS, with the Companies Intellectual Property Commission, and the payroll system. It will therefore electronically verify a supplier's tax and BEE status gently. And also will enable public sector officials doing business with the state to be identified easily. The intervention will also reduce administrative burden for SCM, the supply chain management practitioners, and address many of the concerns raised by the Auditor General every year. In close collaboration with the State Information Technology, a central e-tender portal will be implemented from April this year. It will be compulsory that all tenders be advertised on this portal. And all tender documents will be freely available there. Tender advertisements in newspapers and the government gazettes will be phased out. Malungu ahloniphekile, imizamo kahulumeni yokulwa nenkohlakalo ayisoze yaphumelela uma benzi benkohlakalo bengajeziswa futhi bengancishelwa indawo emphakathini yethu. Inkohlakalo yephuca abantu abampofu intuthuko nezidingo zabo ezibalekile, inotice idlanzana lalaba bavele futhi bedla izambane likaPonda. Malungu ahloniphekile, kuthatha umbimbi oluhlangene lwemgulukudu kuba inkohlakalo iphumelele. Ngakho ke kudingeka umbimbi olubambisene ukulwa nalesi sihlava. Uhulumeni ke abasebenzi nosomabhizinisi kanye nomphakathi kumele babambisane ukuba lolu mbimbi olubambisene luphumelele. A new approach to funding health and education, education infrastructure in provinces was introduced in 2013. Following a 2-year planning cycle, the 2015-16 allocations for the education infrastructure grant and the health facility revitalization grant reflect this new approach. On top of their base allocations, provinces that meet the minimum planning standards have been rewarded for additional allocations. For instance, the Eastern Cape receives an additional 233 million rands due to the quality of its plans for health and education infrastructure investment. We punish non-performance, we reward performance. Therefore, provinces that failed to meet the minimum standards will be prioritized for assistance through the ongoing infrastructure delivery improvement program. This allocation methodology will be expanded over the medium-term expenditure framework period so that all provincial departments continuously improve their planning to be eligible to receive incentive allocations. A non-payment of suppliers on time is also another perennial problem that needs serious attention. This practice works against government's efforts to grow the economy and to develop small-medium enterprises sector. Payment of suppliers within 30 days will from now on be included among other supply chain management requirements in the performance agreements of accounting officials. In turning to the revenue proposals for the year ahead, honorable members, let me emphasize again that we are accountable to the citizens and taxpayers for ensuring value for money in our stewardship of public resources. Our current projection is that revenue will amount to 979 billion rands in 2014-15, with the year which will end shortly, about 14.7 billion rands less than the budget estimate, including non-tax revenue, social security funds, and other receipts, and after deducting 51.7 billion rands, which goes to the Southern African Customs Union partner countries, consolidated budget revenue will be slightly over 1 trillion this year, or about 8.2% more than 2013-14. In the recent past, there has been considerable variation in the Customs Union receipts because of fluctuations in regional trade. The period ahead will also see large shifts in customs receipts with potentially adverse implications for our partner countries. South Africa remains keen to see a revised and improved revenue sharing arrangements that would stabilize and safeguard these resource flows. Minister Davis, we are working with him very closely on this matter, and we hope that we would be able to break through. Personal income tax remains a buoyant source of revenue, but the slowdown in business conditions is reflected in lower than expected company tax, value-added tax, and customs revenue. Tax policy aims to raise revenue in a manner that is fair and efficient, while contributing to social solidarity and supporting long-term economic growth and job creation. Tax reforms since 1994 have considerably broadened the tax base through inclusion of capital gains and closing of tax loopholes. As I indicated in the medium-term budget policy statement in October, ladies and gentlemen, even after lowering our expenditure ceiling and taking into account the need for sustainability in managing our debt, there is still a structural gap between our spending needs and the amount of tax we expect to collect. To bridge this gap, we require additional revenue. In considering tax policy options, we have drawn on advice of the Davis Tax Committee and through the broader annual tax consultation. The need to maintain the overall progressivity of the tax structure is a compelling consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, the 2015 budget tax proposals aim to increase tax revenues as required, but to limit the erosion of corporate tax base, increase incentives for small businesses, and promote greener economy. The main tax proposals are therefore as follows. Personal tax rates will be raised by only 1 percentage point for all taxpayers earning more than 181,900 rands a year. This raises tax by about 21 rands a month for a taxpayer below the age of 65 with an annual income of 200 rands. What's 21 rands before fiscal drag? Listen to the progressivity of it. Let's now listen to the progressivity, because this category is not in this house. Those earning 500,000 rands will pay just 271 rands a month more. And those at 1.5 million rands a year, I'm not sure in this tax increase is only about 1,100 rands a month. But that is before the fiscal drag adjustment. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, however, tax brackets, as I've said, Rebates and medical scheme contribution credits will also be adjusted for inflation as in previous years. The net effect is that there will be tax relief for those earning below 450,000 rands a year, while those with higher income will pay more tax. Honourable members, an increase in the general fuel levy is also proposed of 30.5 cents a litre, which will take effect in April. I'm informed that even though we no longer have a half a cent, for accounting purposes, it's 30.5 cents. Following recommendations of the Davis Tax Committee, a more generous tax regime is proposed for businesses with a turnover below 1 million rands, Minister Zulu, a year. Qualifying businesses with a turnover below 335,000 rands a year will pay no tax. And the maximum rate is reduced from 6% to 3%. To complement this relief, SARS is establishing small business desks in its revenue offices to assist in complying with tax requirements. The rates and brackets for transfer duties on the sale of property will be adjusted to provide relief to middle-income households. The new rates eliminate transfer duties on properties below 750,000 rands, with the rate on properties above 2.2 million rands increasing slightly. Fellow South Africans, excise duties, another interesting part, on alcoholic beverages and tobacco products will increase as follows. We still saved that part, Babshek. That part is still safe. But let me begin. The tax on a quart of beer also just goes up by 15.5 cents. We'll round off to the higher cent. A bottle of wine will cost 15 cents more. There is a complaint that perhaps we should have raised the bottle of wine higher than the one of beer. There is a discussion between the wine and the beer drinkers, which one, who should give up what and who should take up what. A bottle of sparkling wine goes up by 48 cents. And a bottle of whiskey will go up. Yeah. Now, there are people who need to listen because if you don't stock up now, don't complain if it eats into your pocket. It'll go up by only 3.77 rand. And a pack of 20 cigarettes goes up by only 82 cents. I'm receiving other tips here. I will consider them perhaps mid-year. Amendments are proposed to the diesel refund system, which applies in the agriculture, forestry, fishing, and mining sectors. Some of these changes will take effect this year and some in 2016. The net effect of these proposals of the 2015-16 tax revenue is an increase of 8.3 billion rands, which will bring tax revenue for the year to slightly more than 1 trillion rands, or about 10.4% more than 2014-15 tax revenue. There are further tax proposals, honourable members. We are also proposing these measures to promote energy efficiencies, which will be discussed further with the industry, with the electricity regulator, ESCOM, and other interested parties. The first proposal is a temporary increase in the electricity levy from 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour to 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour to assist in demand management. This additional 2 cents per kilowatt hour is drawn when the electricity shortage is over. Secondly, an increase is proposed in the energy efficiency. Listen to this one. Don't listen to the stick only because there is a carrot. Secondly, an increase is proposed in the energy efficiency savings incentive from 45 cents per kilowatt hour to 95 cents per kilowatt hour, together with its extension to the cogeneration projects. Other measures under consideration include enhancing the accelerated depreciation for solar energy. In the absence of a carbon tax, the electricity levy serves both to promote energy efficiency and encourage lower greenhouse gas emissions. The introduction of a carbon tax in 2016 will provide an additional tool to deal more sustainably with the current electricity shortage while lowering the electricity levy. A draft carbon tax bill will be introduced later this year for a further round of public consultations. To ensure that the burden is fairly distributed, steps will be taken to ensure that the electricity levy applies to all users, especially energy-intensive users, while ensuring that there are no double payments. Honorable members, we are also taking further steps to combat financial leakages, which deprive our economy of billions of rands through erosion of the tax base, profit shifting, and illicit money flows. This is the advice I received from Durban businessman, Mr. Wolfe Braude, who is with us today in the gallery. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Mr. Braude. He says, and I quote him, "Action has to be taken to close tax evasion loopholes, such as transfer pricing and profit-shifting strategies by South African corporates. I ask that South Africa continue its support for the recent G20 decisions in this regard and the implementation of actions in support of transparency and sharing of information. South Africa must similarly stand firm in the SADC against tax havens." Close quote. Thank you, Mr. Brown. To this effect, the South African Reserve Bank, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the South African Revenue Services work closely to monitor capital flows. This assists in identifying movements of funds for tax reasons. Internationally, there is increasing collaboration between bank regulators and tax authorities, and so progress is being made to reduce both capital leakages and tax evasion. Drawing on advice of the Davis Tax Committee, amendments will be proposed to improve transfer pricing documentation and revise the rules for controlled foreign companies and the digital economy. There are two further revenue proposals that I need to explain, ladies and gentlemen and honorable members. They both arise from challenges in respect of earmarked taxes. The first is a 50 cents a litre increase in the Road Accident Fund levy. This increase is required in order to finance the progress made by the Road Accident Fund Administration in clearing the claims backlog. But it also reflects that the current compensation system, which has accumulated a 98 billion rands unfunded liability, is just not sustainable. So legislation to establish the new road accident scheme will be tabled this year to provide for affordable and equitable support for those injured in road accidents, so that the funds flow to the victims of road accidents other than the middleman. Once the legislation has been passed, the levy will be assigned to the new scheme. The second special revenue proposal is a one-year relief measure in respect of unemployment insurance fund contributions. Unlike the road accident fund, the UIF has an accumulated surplus of 90 billion rands. Improved benefits are now being introduced, but it is nonetheless possible to provide temporary relief to both employers and employees. The proposal is that the contribution threshold should be reduced to 1,000 rands a month for 2015-16, which means that employers and employees will each pay only 10 rands a month during the year ahead, putting 15 billion rands back into the pockets of the workers and business. This matter is still going to be debated at the appropriate levels after the tabling, as it is a proposal as we speak. Honorable Speaker, state-owned companies play a key role in promoting economic growth and social development. Transnet freight modernization program, for example, has raised the number of trains that run between Johannesburg and Durban to 60 a day from fewer than 20 just a decade ago. I will wait for you to applaud this. State-owned companies will invest about 60 billion rands over the next 3 years, accounting for about 20% of South Africa's gross capital formation. However, financial position of some state enterprises is very unsatisfactory, undermining their ability to contribute towards development. Recommendations to make our public entities more relevant to South Africa's developmental needs have been made by the Presidential Review Committee chaired by Ms. Piecha. Reforms are required to ensure that state companies contribute to building a competitive economy and are not an unnecessary drain and burden on the fiscus. And developmental mandates should also be appropriately financed, and state companies must serve the national interest. Private investment and partnerships with state-owned companies are elements of our strategy for strengthening infrastructure investment and improving service delivery. As indicated in last year's medium-term budget policy statement, fiscal support to state-owned companies over the period ahead will be financed through offsetting asset sales so that there is no impact on the budget deficit. The required turnaround in performance and delivery on the government priorities will be closely monitored under the Deputy President's oversight. To stabilize its financial position, Eskom will apply to the regulator this year for adjustments towards cost-reflective tariffs. In October 2014, we announced a broad package for Eskom, including a capital injection of R1 billion. Governance improvements, operational cost containment, additional borrowing and support for required tariff increases were among the proposals. The fiscal allocation of 23 billion rands will be paid in 3 installments, with the first transfer to be made by June this year. A special appropriation bill will be tabled once the finance has been raised. If further support is deemed necessary, consideration will be given to an equity conversion of government subordinated loan to Eskom. Government has also stepped in to address the financial position of the South African Airways. SAA reported a net loss of 2.6 billion in 2013-14 as a result of high operating costs, losses on several international routes, and valuation adjustments. We have made of 14.4 billion available to SAA, on which the airline has drawn about 8.3 billion rands. Measures to achieve operational efficiencies and restore profitability are now in progress. Guarantees have also been provided to the South African Post Office, subject to implementation of its turnaround strategy. This involves revised universal service obligations and delivery targets, taking into account the decline in the mail and courier businesses and the shift to digital communication. Minister Cwele has appointed an administrator to lead the South African Post Office's turnaround. Honorable Speaker, one of the strengths on which our National Development Plan is the financial health and capacity of our development finance institution. At the end of 2013-14, their combined assets amounted to 250 billion rands against liabilities of 107 billion rands. The Development Bank of Southern Africa, the Industrial Development Corporation, the Land Bank, and other national DFIs will expand their loan portfolios by about 33% over the next 2 years, including substantial investment in renewable energy, agriculture, industrial infrastructure, and beneficiation projects. Several initiatives are in progress to strengthen the role of DFIs. The first is a review of provincial entities that has been initiated, aimed at enhancing their effectiveness and sustainability. The second is an organizational review of the Land Bank, which will be conducted under the leadership of the newly appointed board and chief executive to enhance its support for emerging farmers and commercial agriculture. The DBSA, which is the third one, will take the lead in developing South Africa's municipal debt market, and in order to accelerate both public and private sector investment in urban renewal. The IDC aims to mobilize 100 billion rands over the next 5 years to promote faster industrial development and mineral beneficiation and agro-processing. Of special importance is the Land Bank's collaboration with the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform to bring rural land restitution and redistribution projects to full production. This initiative will build on the bank's success in supporting black farmers through its Retail Emerging Markets division, which has financed over 400 projects and created 7,000 employment opportunities to date without any defaults. The DBSA will continue to manage the Infrastructure and Investment Program for South Africa, which is a partnership with the European Commission to strengthen project preparation and co-funding arrangements. It also provides support to the Independent Power Producer Program, which will be extended to include new generation capacity from hydro, coal, and gas sources to complement Eskom's baseload energy capacity. Co-generation and demand management initiatives are also being supported. Honorable Speaker, South Africa signed a treaty last year to give birth to a new multilateral development bank to be based in Shanghai, in China. We are excited to be part of this new venture, especially given the leverage South Africa will have on resources that will augment our infrastructure investment programs and those of the sub-Saharan African countries. The first regional office of the bank will be located in South Africa. Honorable members, I'm pleased to be able to report that under the capable management of the Public Investment Corporation, the retirement funding assets of the public service members and pensioners have grown strongly over the past year. Government Employees Pension Fund remains well-funded and soundly managed. Pensioners of the GEPF, the Associated Institutions Pension Fund, and the Temporary Employees Pension Fund, as well as recipients of special and military pensions, will receive 5.8% pension increase with effect from the 1st of April. We have noted with concern that some civil servants are resigning from the GEPF, driven by high level of indebtedness or incorrect information on the retirement reform process. I want to assure civil servants that the pension reforms currently under consideration will not adversely affect their benefits. And I did make a statement in this House on this matter. Ngifuna ukuphinda ngcono ngisho nangesizulu. Ngoba ngifuna ukuxwayisa ngalesi simo esingaba nomthelela ongemuhle uma umkhuba wokudla imbewu unganqandwa. Ngifuna ukugcizelela futhi ukuthi akukho nakancane okugida kujeqeza impesheni zezisebenzi, ikakhulukazi lezi zikahulumeni. Shona inguquko ezihlongozwayo azisichaphazeli nakancane ezikuhulumeni. Siyazi ukuthi iningi labantu bakithi bacindezelwe izikweletu. Kodwa ukudla enqolobaneni akusixazululi isimo sakho. Kunalokho kwenza isimo sibe simbe kakhulu, ikakhulukazi esethatha umhlala phansi esedondolozela. Honorable members, I'm pleased to confirm that with effect from the 1st of March, the new tax-free savings account will now be available. Significant progress. I was surprised that I thought maybe I didn't emphasize it enough. Should I repeat it? Yes. Honorable members, I am pleased to confirm that with effect from the 1st of March 2015, the new tax-free savings account will now be available. Significant progress has been achieved in relation to retirement reforms, and consultations with the NEDLEC will continue. The first draft of default regulations will be issued shortly for public comment. These reforms have one central objective: to maximize the long-term benefits to retirement fund members so that they can retire comfortably. Our financial services sector is one of South Africa's strengths, but as noted in our recent market conduct policy framework, a framework document, it needs to do more to treat this fairly. The bill establishing the two regulatory authorities, the so-called Twin Peaks reform, will be tabled later this year. We have strengthened regulations for banks and will be doing so this year for insurers, for derivatives, and hedge funds. We will take steps to strengthen the supervision of large financial groups and collective investment schemes, particularly money market funds. Under its curatorship, the African Bank is now generating positive cash flows. We announced a 7 billion rands backstop last year, but our expectation is still that the bank will be stabilized without recourse to taxpayers' funds. The problem of excessive household indebtedness remains a serious challenge. Approximately 45% of credit-active consumers have impaired credit records. This results in part from poor market conduct by lenders and financial advisors. We are engaging with the major banks on further steps to be taken to assist over-indebted consumers. Government also welcomes initiatives of employers in the private sector who have audited garnishee orders applied to their employees and have taken steps to identify illegally issued orders. Honorable Speaker, this has been a challenging budget to prepare under difficult economic circumstances. The resources at our disposal are limited. Our economic growth initiatives have to be intensified. Mindful of these circumstances, Stefan Skuman of Johannesburg wrote in response to the Budget Tips campaign online, just to wish me all the best for what he described as a daunting task. Thank you, Stefan. Preparing a budget under difficult circumstances is a reminder that our public services are many and varied, and that will rely on the efforts of good judgment of many thousands of public servants, teachers, health workers, and law enforcement officers every day. And our economy comprises a great diversity of enterprises, of factories, mines, service centers and shop floors, welfare organizations, trade unions, industry associations. Our collective future depends on the energy and enterprise of all of us. The 2015 budget takes forward our National Development Plan and medium-term strategic framework, recognizing that the gains of our democracy have to be shared more equally and our economy has to be given greater impetus. Allow me to thank you, Mr. President, for your guidance and support. My appreciation goes to Mr. Deputy President for his wise counsel. I would also like to thank my cabinet colleagues for their cooperation and support. Members of the Ministers' Committee on the Budget, including the Deputy Minister, Jonas, yes. They have been especially generous in their time and wise advice. I also wish to thank the provincial premiers and finance MECs and municipal mayors who share our fiscal and financial responsibilities. I know that members of the House will also join me in expressing my appreciation to the following people: the Director General of the Treasury, Mr. Lungisa Fuzile, and officials at the National Treasury. The Governor of the Central Bank, Mr. Khanyago, your Deputy Governors, and staff of the South African Reserve Bank. Commissioners and staff of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the chairpersons, boards, chief executive officers, and staff of the DBSA, the Land Bank, the Public Investment Corporation, the Financial Services Board, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the Government Pensions Administration Agency. The staff and constituency representatives of NEDLEC, and particularly its Public Finance Chamber. And lastly, but not least, the Judge Dennis Davis, who I believe is with us in the gallery, and members of your tax committee. Thank you for your work. But also allow me, before I lose my right to access to my residence, to thank my family for their invaluable support and Honorable Speaker, I therefore take this opportunity to table before this House the budget speech, the 2015 budget review, which includes the fiscal framework, the revenue proposals, including customs and excise duties, the estimates of national revenue, and replies to the budgetary review and recommendation reports. It's all in here. I also table the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and the estimates of national expenditure. Honorable Speaker and members of the House, these are our budget proposals, and I look forward to further engagement through our committees and the parliamentary budget process. I'm especially grateful to the chair of the Finance and Appropriation Committees, the Honorable Mr. Karim and Mr. De Beer, Mr. Mashatile and Mr. Mohai, who have the responsibility of steering consideration of the Division of Revenue Bill and the Appropriation Bill, and the revenue bills which will be tabled later in the year. Preparation of the budget is the outcome of inputs and efforts of countless people in the Treasury, government departments, in provinces, in municipalities, and our public entities. Implementation of the budget, Honorable Speaker, is the collective outcome of the activities of all South Africans, workers and businesses who contribute to economic activity, investors who make growth possible, savers and taxpayers, officials and service providers, protectors, advisors, those who work on our farms, those who care for the young and the elderly. Therefore, it is my privilege to commit these proposals for the consideration of all South Africans and to reaffirm our commitment to work together with all South Africans in pursuing a better future. And thank you very much.
I now recognize the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Honourable Speaker, I move that the speech of the Minister and other documents be referred to the relevant committee for consideration and report. I thank you.
Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. That concludes the business for the day. The House is adjourned.